Good morning. I am Sudeep. This is a group presentation on the topic migration and study. Let's start with the introduction. By definition, the student migration is the movement of students who study outside their country of birth or citizenship for a period of 12 months or more. With time, the international education is gaining more popularity and the students seems to consider it as a stepping stone to permanently reside in a country. The foreign students have a great impact on the economies of the host country, both financially and culturally. And to facilitate their arrival and integration, several amendments to the immigration and visa policies are made. While the immigration policies in leading countries like the US and the UK are not enabling transition to work visas, the other institutions are competing hard to attract international students. So that's all about the introductory part. The rest of the topics will be handled by my group members, starting with the history of migration and study, which will be presented by Ayana.
Hello all, this is Ayana. I am here to talk about the history of student migration. When we talk about the history of student migration, we can see that during the colonial period, the majority of students come from the colonies to the world capitals. Imperial governments provided pathways for selected nationals to pursue higher education. Actually, the concept of studying abroad was based on the assumption that the graduates would return to their homeland to serve the colonial administrations once they had developed the skills and observed the value of colonial rulers. The Cold War era had a significant impact on foreign aid and the funding overseas students. The policy of distributing scientific knowledge and sharing industrial progress with the developing world required the help of higher education institutions. Cold War rivals funded study abroad programs and were in competition to attract students from the developing world. Moving to the next slide. One of the most famous international exchange programs that facilitates and encourages international student migration is the Fulbright program, which was established in 1946, which provides grants for students, scholars, teachers, and professionals to undertake studies and research. The program was initially funded by using proceeds from the sales of surplus war property, and it was founded on the principle of promoting international goodwill through the exchange of students in the field of education, culture, and science. The Colombo Plan was another program that encouraged the movement of students between countries. It was established in 1951 with the intention of strengthening economic and social development of the Asia-Pacific region. The program has been responsible for sponsoring over 40,000 Asian students to study or train in Australian higher education institutions. Funding is provided by the member countries, and the member countries include 26 Commonwealth and non-Commonwealth countries. Since the colonial and Cold War eras, the profile of international students has made a significant shift. The way in which students travel has changed, and the majority of the students seeking education abroad are now self-funded. So, these are some of the history of student migration. The next topic is organization. This will be presented by Anjali.
Hello friends, I am Anjali here to present before you the next phase of our presentation. Before, we had discussed about the history of the immigration policies, which mainly included two of them: the Fulbright program established in 1946 and the Colombo Plan established in 1951. Has anyone thought who implemented these policies? Is it just one person or the same department in charge of everything? For this, we need to know about the organization. So, let's discuss about it. To make it easy to understand, we are going to discuss with an example, that is, the United States Department of State. This is the department which plays a major role in implementing of these policies in the US. The United States Department of State, commonly referred to as the State Department, is a federal executive department responsible for carrying out US foreign policy and international relations. It was established in 1789 as the nation's first executive department. Its duties include advising the President of the United States, administering the nation's diplomatic missions, negotiating treaties and agreements with foreign entities, and representing the US at the United Nations. Now, let's talk about the organization of this department. The department is led by the Secretary of State, a member of the Cabinet who is nominated by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Senate. The Secretary of State serves as the nation's chief diplomat and representative abroad and is the first cabinet official in the order of precedence and in the presidential line of succession. The Secretary of State is the chief executive officer of the Department of State and a member of the cabinet that answers directly to and advises the President of the United States. The Secretary organizes and supervises the entire department and its staff. Under the Secretary of State, we have the United States Deputy Secretary of State. The Deputy Secretary, with the Chief of Staff, Executive Secretary, and the Under Secretary for Management, assist the Secretary in the overall management of the department. Reporting to the Deputy Secretary are the 6 Under Secretaries and the Counselor, along with several staff officers. So, under the United States Deputy Secretary of State, we have the Chief of Staff, Executive Secretary, Office of Cultural Heritage, Office of Global Intergovernmental Affairs, National Foreign Affairs Training Center, Office of Legal Advisor, Office of the Inspector General, Office of Management Policy, Office of Civil Rights, Office of Protocol, Office of Science and Technology Advisor, Office of the Senior Advisor for the Civil Society and Emerging Democracies, Office of Global Women's Issues, Bureau of Intelligence and Research, Bureau of Legislative Affairs, Bureau of Budget and Planning. Then comes the Secretary of State for Political Affairs. This is the 4th ranking State Department official. Becomes acting Secretary in the absence of the Secretary of State and the 2 Deputy Secretaries of State. This position is responsible for bureaus headed by Assistant Secretaries, coordinating American diplomacy around the world. Next, we have the Secretary of State for Management, the principal advisor of the Secretary and Deputy Secretary on matters relating to allocation and the use of department's budget, physical property, and personnel. This position is responsible for bureaus headed by Assistant Secretaries, planning the day-to-day administration of the department and proposing institutional reform and modernization. Then, we have Secretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy and Environment, the Senior Economic Advisor for the Secretary and Deputy Secretary on International Economic Policy. This position is responsible for bureaus headed by Assistant Secretaries dealing with trade, agriculture, aviation, and bilateral trade relations with America's economic partners. Next, we have Secretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. This Under Secretary leads functions that were formerly assigned to the United States Information Agency but were integrated into the State Department by 1999 reorganization. This position manages units that handle the department's public communications and seek to burnish the image of the United States around the world. Then we move on to Secretary of State for Arms Control and International Security Affairs. This Under Secretary coordinates the department's role in U.S. military assistance. Since the 1996 reorganization, this Under Secretary also oversees the functions of the formerly independent Arms Control and Disarmament Agency. Next, we have the Secretary of State for Civilian Security, Democracy and Human Rights. This Undersecretary leads the department's efforts to prevent the counter threats to civilian security and advises the Secretary of State on matters related to governance, democracy and human rights. Last, we have the Counselor. Ranking with the Undersecretaries, the Counselor is the Secretary's and Deputy Secretary's special advisor and consultant on major problems of foreign policy. The Counselor provides guidance to the appropriate bureaus with respect to such matters, conducts special international negotiations and consultations, and undertakes special assignments from time to time as directed by the Secretary. We also have one more, that is the Office of Global AIDS Coordinator. The President's main task force to combat global AIDS. The Global AIDS Coordinator reports directly to the Secretary of the State. So as you can see, this was the organization of the Department of State. Here we have discussed this in brief. So we have many of the departments belonging to these main departments which come under these departments and work for the department. Now let's move on to our next topic, which is students' visa and immigration policies. In this, we are going to discuss about the immigration policies of different countries, starting with the United States. The US attracts a large number of foreigners to its workforce each year. However, international graduates of US institutions do not automatically have the right to remain in the country for work purposes upon completion of their courses. In fact, as a part of the student application process, applicants must state that they are not planning to immigrate to the US. Visa and immigration policies in the US are significantly less accommodating towards international students and graduates compared to the other host countries. The greatest changes to visa regulations occurred after the attacks of September 11, 2001, when the US immediately implemented tougher visa and immigration requirements. Under the Enhanced Border Security and Visas Entry Reform Act 2002, the US introduced a new overseas student tax in order to fund an advanced computer tracking system for visa applications, but also made it more difficult for applicants to transfer between visa categories. Recently, the US Department of State has established a new internship scheme which has been specifically designed for foreign students. Since July 2007, certain international students are eligible to participate in a year-long internship per degree level for practical training as long as they can describe how experience can enhance their education. Next, we move on to United Kingdom. In 2006, as part of a larger scheme to attract highly skilled labor, the UK government made amendments to the Science and Engineering Graduate Scheme, which enabled all the international students who have completed a postgraduate degree course to remain in the UK and seek employment for up to 12 months regardless of the discipline. The government has also made a special provision for internationally converted MBA students, allowing graduates of 50 highly ranked business schools to apply for a 3-year extension to their 1-year working visa once their studies have been completed. As part of highly skilled migrant program, such students have been eligible to apply for permanent residence since 12th April 2005. However, in March 2011, the UK government made an announcement on reforming student visa system, which is getting much stricter. The major changes in student immigration policies, including tougher requirements for entrance, tightening work entitlements and closing the post-study work route, are aimed at ensuring the UK welcomes the best overseas students with expected contribution. Next, we have Germany and France. First, let's discuss about Germany. Since January 2005, Germany has issued singular permits for both residence and employment in an effort to attract international students and skilled migrants to the country and facilitate their arrival. Overseas students are also eligible to apply for an extension on their residence permit for up to 1 year for the purpose of seeking employment which is relevant to their field of study upon completion of their studies. Next is France. In France, international students have the right to work part-time for up to 19 hours per week while studying. Students must, however, have a valid residency permit and be enrolled in an institution which participates in the French social protection system. Upon completion of studies, students are able to accept offers of employment from French firms by applying for temporary employment authorization. Now, moving on to Canada. International students traveling to Canada are not required to apply for a study visa unless the programs they are enrolled in are longer than 6 months. However, acquiring a student permit does have significant benefits to students, giving them permission to seek a part-time employment on the campus and since April 2006 off campus for up to 20 hours per week while studying. Under the post-graduation work permit programs, international graduates from Canadian higher education institutions are eligible to apply for employment of up to 2 years. Now, moving on to the last one, that is Australia. In addition to Australia's point system, which encourages skilled migration, regulations allow all international students completing an Australian degree to remain in the country for about 18 months upon graduating. Students can earn bonus points for skilled work experience and English language proficiency in addition to those already earned for Australian qualifications under amendments to the General Skilled Migration Program. Previously, international students were exempt from work experience requirements when applying for General Skilled Migration. Legislation introduced on September 1, 2007 requires authorities to provide temporary visas to enable applicants to earn experience. These changes were made to strengthen links between study, work experience, and employment to ensure migrants have the skills that Australian employers are looking for. The main rationale behind these schemes is the desire of Australia to benefit from the skills of foreign graduates. Students no longer have the option to remain in Australia following the completion of the master's degree for the purpose of work. It is now necessary to reapply under specific sponsorship. So, this was all about my topic. Next, I invite Sreekanth to continue with the next topic.
Hello, I'm Sreekanth. Just now we have come across the topic student visa and immigration policy. Now we are moving on to the topic the effects of migration flows on education. In this topic, we are mainly discussing on second generation and international students. In second generation, as we all know, the migrants remains in the host country for a considerable amount of time, whereas their children may spend their entire childhood in the host country. This will create a wider consequences while returning to home country. They may be incompatible with the educational system, making educational decisions along with their way. Now, according to the findings of Bojas, the expected earning of the second generation is only 50 to 60% of the first generation. That is, as the generation changes, the working capability were getting reduced. Now, the immigrant children's education choices have direct impact or repercussions on the educational choices of the natives. That is, according to Fairley, for every 4 immigrants arriving in public school, 1 native student switches to private school. This is called native flight. It is particularly pronounced among white native students and in response to the arrival of non-English speaking immigrant children. And another finding says that the second generation shows more involvement in literature, culture, social activities than the first generation. Now moving on to the international students. Some countries have specialized in production of education, transforming the service in a successful export industry. Educational services are among the top export industry including the US, UK and Australia. They are generally viewed as having a position impact on the host country economy. As a result, international students flow are generally uncapped. Since they are enjoying sufficient freedom and resources from the host countries, Migrants tries to have permanent residence in the host country. According to Borjas, the increase in the migrant students will decrease the job opportunities of the natives. But because of the substantial increase in the flow of migrants, some countries are showing casual attitude towards them. This is all about my topic, effects of migration flows on education. Next topic is on the merits and demerits, which will be presented by Thejaswikrishna.
Hello, I am Thejaswikrishna. Just now we have seen about the topic effects of migration flows on education. Now we are going to discuss about the topic contributing factors to growth in student migration. It can also be considered as the merits of migration and study. There are many factors which contributes to the growth of student migration. Many developing countries have an undersupply of university which places to satisfy demand, and as a result, students have no other choice but to study abroad. In addition to this, it is a common expectation that studying overseas can enhance professional business opportunities. Just now we have come across our first 2 points, which are undersupply of university and enhancing professional business opportunities. Then the third point, that is students seeking cross-border education migrate to countries with more developed institutions than their own. So as an example for this, students in Arab countries migrate to Egypt and Jordan to pursue their studies, and also many students from Bangladesh and Nepal travel to India. The flow of students from developing countries to developed countries is due to the belief that the quality and standard of education offered in OECD countries, OECD stands for the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Okay, so the education offered in these countries is superior to what offered in their country of origin. Now, saying about the fourth point, that is gateway to permanent residency within a host nation. That is, higher education has become a major global export commodity, with developing countries capitalizing on domestic shortages by recruiting foreign students. So subsequently, changes to visa and immigration policies have provided incentives for students to travel abroad. And thus, it potentially offers a gateway to permanent residency within a host nation. Thereby, the migration opportunities become the major contribution to the growth of student migration. Next, moving on to the fifth point, which is the desire to study other language. Saying about that, for example, a growth in the number of students traveling to study in UK from Eastern Europe is because they wish to study in a higher education environment where communication is in English. And the other factors for the rise in student migration include lowering travel expenses and greater communication technology, which has made studying abroad more accessible. So that's all about the factors which contributes to the growth in student migration. Next is the major issues that can arise due to student migration. It's more like the demerits of migration and study. Okay, there is a situation called brain drain, which means large-scale loss of individual with technical skills or knowledge. So the loss of students from sending countries can have a rather detrimental impact on economy by depleting already scarce resources. Next point, that is the difference in learning culture. It is also a major issue in student migration, and this means that the students can have difficulty if the teaching, learning and assessment methods are very different from those in their previous education. For example, some European students studying in Britain have been noted as having very little experience of number of tasks, more like group discussion or presentation, while many are only familiar with traditional forms of assessment such as examinations. So that's all about the major issues that can arise due to student migration. Next is the conclusion of our presentation, and it will be presented by Sreekanth.
Now I am here to conclude our topic, migration and study. We discussed about various aspects of the links between migration and education. We have gone through the history of migration and study, immigration policies, effects, causes of migration, and its demerits. And we also link the organization with migration. Now, concluding with a quote from Ban Ki-moon. A migration is an expression of human aspiration for dignity, safety, and a better future. Thank you.